All right, everyone. I think we're live. My name is John Carvalho. I'm here with Roger Ver. You guys know me as Bitcoin Errolog. I have a company called Exotica.tv doing Bitcoin with live streaming. And basically, a lot of people wanted us to talk. So I asked you if you'd come here today to answer some questions I have, basically mostly about scaling.
Glad to be
Everybody,
here, and I think we need more discussions rather than less. So thank you, John.
Awesome. Everybody let me know if there's technical difficulty. I'll try to check the chat, but I'm assuming everything is fine at the moment. Okay, so mostly, the main contention that between Bitcoiners and big blockers or Bitcoin Cash, Bcash people is about scaling, right? Would you agree? Well, all right, wait, let's go to that for a second. Why do you have a problem with people calling it Bcash?
If I called you a four-letter word that you didn't want to be called, you wouldn't appreciate it. I don't know a single person that's a fan of Bitcoin Cash who wants it to be called Bcash.
But it's like, why do you get to call Bitcoin what you want, but I don't get to call it what I want?
Words have meanings, and nobody that created Bitcoin Cash refers to it as Bcash. So if the people that created it and the developers and the miners and the people that are using it don't refer to that, if I started calling you, I started calling you honky and you don't like to be called honky, and I can say, hey, you're a honky. And it's just like the same way people are jerks for calling Bitcoin Cash Bcash. None of the people that support Bitcoin Cash want to be called that.
But the people that call it that, the people that call it that see it the opposite way too, though. They have the same feeling. They feel like they know what Bitcoin is, and that it's an insult to have somebody else call Bitcoin call their altcoin or fork coin, Bitcoin as well, because there's only, in the end, you and I both know there's only one Bitcoin. Like the first Bitcoin is the original Bitcoin.
On that point as well at this point. So
how can you have, but you have to differentiate. Like the original one is still always going to be the one, even if one becomes more popular. It doesn't kill it. It doesn't get to take the name.
So the title of the Bitcoin white paper is a peer-to-peer cash system, right? Peer-to-peer electronic cash system. Core's version of Bitcoin is a peer-to-peer electronic cash system?
I don't think Bitcoin was ever peer-to-peer. That's why we have nodes that nobody is connecting directly to each other.
Okay, so you disagree with the title of this Bitcoin white paper written by Satoshi Nakamoto. That's fine.
I mean, I disagree with a lot of things in the white paper. It's not a gospel. It's not a Bible, right? Like we have to.
I agree. It's not a gospel and it's not a Bible, but I think it's pretty unfair for someone who disagrees with what's in the Bitcoin white paper to claim that this thing that isn't Bitcoin white paper is the real version of Bitcoin. If you read the Bitcoin white paper and then you look at the characteristics.
Well, no. We know what the real Bitcoin is because it's a live network. We all can point at it. We all can agree on which one
it's Bitcoin Cash. Okay, we agree.
No, Bitcoin Cash is Bcash, is Bitcoin Cash. It's a whole new separate network of people, right?
You just admitted that the original core version of Bitcoin is not what's described in the original Bitcoin white paper published on bitcoin.org and written by Satoshi Nakamoto. If the Bitcoin core version of Bitcoin isn't in line with the original Bitcoin white paper, I don't think it's fair to call that one the one and true and only Bitcoin.
But there's no such thing as a Bitcoin core version of Bitcoin. The live Bitcoin network has a protocol, and Bitcoin Core is just a software repository of a compatible version of Bitcoin that works on that protocol, right? It's not an actual like network. It's not a living thing. It's just a repository as far as core goes.
Yeah, it's very important to define terms. So if we want to define Bitcoin Core, it's just the GitHub repository that people can contribute to, and the network of nodes that are running that software. I think I'm fine with that definition.
Then, if you're fine with the fact that that's the definition of core,
I guess if I can add one caveat.
Go ahead.
I don't think Bitcoin Core is really an accurate description. I don't think it's the core of much of anything at this point. It's just a name.
Hey, but if that's what they want to call themselves, shouldn't you respect them and let them call themselves that?
It's been a really good branding technique and marketing technique because people view it as, oh, this must be the core, as in the center of Bitcoin, and I don't think that that's necessarily true.
Yeah, I mean, I think that I consider Core to be a cooperative of developers. It's an open source project that anybody can contribute to, and you're only going to get your code changes in.
Can anybody contribute to it? So what happened to Gavin Andresen there, who's the guy that Satoshi Nakamoto handed over the keys to that GitHub repository? He was then nice enough to share.
Satoshi never had a GitHub account, so that's not true. So he didn't hand over anything to Gavin, and Satoshi left when Gavin met with the CIA. So
it was
let's keep facts where they are.
At the time. Okay, so I believe it was on SourceForge at the time. Anyhow, Gavin Andresen, Satoshi Nakamoto himself, Gavin was nice enough to then share access to other people. Those other people revoked his access without his consent. They
didn't revoke his access to add code to Bitcoin. They revoked his access to approve code to be included in the actual published repository.
Without his permission. He was the one that had that permission given to him directly from Satoshi Nakamoto himself.
I just established that that's not true. He didn't get permission from Satoshi. Satoshi left when Gavin went to the CIA, and Satoshi never had a GitHub account.
Satoshi asked Gavin. Satoshi very clearly handed over the project to Gavin. I don't think that's indisputable. And if anybody disagrees with us,
why would you want to even use something where somebody could hand the project over to somebody? There's no concept of that.
It's not the project as a whole. Nobody controls Bitcoin. That's why we're here arguing about it. If somebody controlled Bitcoin and could make everything happen, there wouldn't be any point in us arguing with it. That person would do whatever the heck they want. So,
right. And all right, so let's move on. I don't want to dwell too much, but I do think it's important that we talk about what core actually is. And
I think that's fine. Although I'd like to add one final point. So, whatever the initial politics were, Gavin then shared his access with other people. Those other people then revoked his access under the guise of being concerned that his account had been hacked.
Mm-hmm.
Had been hacked. They never restored his access. That seems
that wasn't the only reason.
That was what?
As far as I know, there were other reasons. They had been asking him to revoke it voluntarily for a while because he wasn't contributing anymore. And when you have somebody that has high-level access like that, it creates a security problem if they aren't even a contributor, because you don't want to have everybody having a key if they're not using the key to your house, right?
Okay. I understand that argument, but at the same time, I don't think that that's the right way to go about it. So.
Yeah, well, in the end, I think Gavin did do a lot to destroy his own reputation, and he did do a lot to let go of the value that he was bringing to Bitcoin by not contributing anymore and focusing on contributing to things that were antagonistic. So,
I think we disagree on those points as well, but I think the heart of the matter is let's talk about block size and scale.
Sure, let's.
I think that's, we have an hour left to go, so let's get to it for.
I remember you saying that you wanted to, that you supported the SegWit2x fork. And I'm pretty sure you said that when it enabled that the Bitcoin.com and you would fully support it. Why didn't you?
So I guess we should stop and give the whole history there. So I wasn't able to attend the meeting in person where the New York agreement came to fruition. And the SegWit2x agreement was made there. One of the other Bitcoin.com team members was there. I do my best to honor my agreements. So he was there as my proxy. I wouldn't have agreed to it had I been there myself, but I wasn't there. He was there. But so we followed through with that. We supported. I even made a bet for about $6 million publicly that I thought SegWit2x would. I supported it full on. All of our infrastructure was set to go along with SegWit2x, and then a bunch of people decided to cancel it at the last minute. And as we had announced previously, if SegWit2x were not to take place, we would start devoting all of our resources on Bitcoin.com to supporting Bitcoin Cash, which is exactly what we started doing now. And that's been going on for what, 10 days now, or however long it's been since SegWit2x was canceled. What
ended up happening with that bet?
I'm sorry, what ended
up happening with the bet?
Hopefully you guys can't hear it, but I had bad time. There's a bunch of like jackhammering or construction going on next door. So if you can,
it's not too bad. Don't worry about it. It sounds okay. But
it makes it hard for me to hear you.
Oh, I see. What happened with the bet? Did somebody get resolved? How did it work?
So in the terms of the bet, if the fork never took place, everybody just kept their coins. And at this point, the fork never took place. So everybody just kept their original coins. Hold those coins for more Bitcoin Cash.
Yeah. Let's see. What do we have here? You got some controversy recently for the Bitcoin.com wallet. People noticed that it was defaulting to creating a Bitcoin Cash wallet inside of the software, and they felt that, and you are really big on saying you're against force and you're against fraud, right? And how do you see it as not fraudulent to just take something and call it Bitcoin within the surface and then redefine it in small print that it's actually Bitcoin Cash.
So I'm opening my Bitcoin.com wallet right here, and hopefully it'll come through clear enough. And here's what it looks like. And I don't know how well that comes through, but you can see very, very clearly it says Bitcoin Cash and Bitcoin Wallet.
But to a newcomer, they don't know, they might not even know that it's two separate things. They might just think Bitcoin Cash is what it means when I put Bitcoin in my mobile wallet or something.
Litecoin is just a lighter version of Bitcoin, so I don't think it's confusing. And
if I search that app on the App Store, what's the title? I'll do it right now. Maybe I can hold up my phone.
Yeah, we can both do it right now. The app's already installed on my phone, so I'm not searching for it often. But let's take a look. So
I'm gonna guess it's called Bitcoin.com wallet.
By Bitcoin.com. So how is that confusing? It's a Bitcoin wallet and it's by Bitcoin.com.
Right, but what would you? How if there were one that were a Bitcoin that wasn't Bitcoin Cash? How would I know the difference? How would you title them?
This wallet supports Bitcoin Core and Bitcoin Cash, so it's very clearly a Bitcoin wallet. It supports 2 of the 9 different versions of Bitcoin that are out there in the world.
Yeah, well, so a big issue with the way that you promote the things that you support, going back to Classic, Unlimited, etc., is that all our concern, all the contention that you see from the legacy Bitcoin or core Bitcoin or SegWit Bitcoin, whatever you want to call it, side, is we're concerned for the noobs. We're concerned for the people that are ignorant, that are coming into the space, because you have a lot of marketing power that you put behind your actions, and we're worried about that people are going to come in through a confusing state, through a misinformed state, and not know what's what.
You're concerned about the noobs losing $20 per transaction when they buy $50 of Bitcoin and they send it to their wallet and they only have $30 left? That's not concerning to you for new people?
I mean, we can talk about fees separately. Let's talk about. I want to talk about fees, but let's talk about that separately.
I think
I'm talking about education. I'm talking about what people are presented with when they come. I'm not talking about whether they're paying fees.
Here's my stance, and you can pick it apart here. My stance is that Bitcoin Cash is the real true version of Bitcoin as outlined by Satoshi Nakamoto in the Bitcoin white paper as listed on bitcoin.org, not even on .com. On the original bitcoin.org website, Bitcoin Cash is the version of Bitcoin that most closely resembles the Bitcoin. So Bitcoin.
How do you make that leap though? There's no mention of Bitcoin Cash. There's no mentioning of 2 megabytes being a requirement. There's no mention of anything to do with Bitcoin Cash is special facets within the white paper.
We can read the white paper together, and the title of the white paper is that it's a peer-to-peer electronic cash system.
How is Bitcoin Cash peer-to-peer and Bitcoin not?
So I'll tell you exactly how. So Bitcoin Cash allows you to send and receive any amount of money with anyone, anywhere in the world instantly, basically for free, and there's nothing anyone can do to stop it.
That last part is definitely not true. Because you are a smaller network, you are easier to stop. That's the first point. Second of all, the only reason your transactions are cheaper is because you don't have people spamming your network yet. When your network becomes more value.
So when you guys claim that people are spamming the Bitcoin.com, the Bitcoin Core network, absolute absurdity. If people are paying a fee, definition, it's not spam.
All right, I agree with you on that definition. The only way to differentiate spam from a real transaction is a fee, but it's still an attack vector. When you have very, very cheap fees or little to no fees, your Bitcoin Cash is going to have the same problem as Bitcoin. You're going to have people that are going to be able to fill because nobody gives a shit.
And how come Bitcoin never, ever, ever had any of these problems until the blocks became full? Bitcoin was fantastic for the first 7 years of Bitcoin experience. You could send and receive any amount of money anywhere instantly, basically for free. Most of the time it was free, and your transactions were always included in the very next block, and it had an amazingly wonderful user experience. And that led Bitcoin to grow from almost nothing to the worldwide phenomenon that it is today. Okay. And it wasn't until the blocks became full, which then caused the fees to become high, which then caused the transaction confirmation time to become unreliable, which made Bitcoin have a bad user experience. And that made Bitcoin drop from having nearly 100% market share, 50% market share that it is today.
Well, all right, let's not paint that. Let's talk about the market cap. Let's talk about the market cap. Through all of the years of your complaining about Bitcoin scaling, all the developers were always working on scaling and adding things like SegWit and network.
Bitcoin Core has completely and utterly failed. Bitcoin, how many more transactions can it do per second than it used to be able to do?
It can do a lot with Lightning Network. It can do a lot with SegWit.
When was the last time you did a Lightning Network transaction in commerce?
I've never done one, but I do SegWit all the time.
And I use Bitcoin all day, every day. I've never once done a Lightning Network transaction. And the amount of difficulty that it is for the entire ecosystem to switch from Bitcoin Core to Bitcoin Cash or Ethereum or Dash or Monero or take your pick is much, much, much smaller than the amount of effort and resources and retooling that's required for people to switch from making transactions to Bitcoin Core Lightning transactions. It's not going to make that jump anytime soon, if ever. What's happening is Bitcoin is market cap and market share is just bleeding into altcoins like crazy. So the real
how can you say the market cap is bleeding? We're like at $10,000 now. You know, you started this campaign of wanting bigger blocks before we were even at 1,000, and it's 10x. And you're saying that people have a problem with Bitcoin?
Because Bitcoin's market share used to be about 99%. Now it's about 53%. Right? So it's lost half of its market share. Market share is now bled into altcoins. That should be terrifying to anybody that was a fan of Bitcoin. And that's why I've been so adamant about this issue. People, the Bitcoin Core team have intentionally destroyed Bitcoin's usability. It costs more than ever before to make a Bitcoin transaction, and those transactions are less reliable than ever before. When things cost more and are less reliable, people seek out alternatives. And those alternatives that
how did Bitcoin Core do this? How did Bitcoin Core do it?
By intentionally capping the block size. So in the beginning of Bitcoin, blocks were maybe 5 kilobytes because not many people were using Bitcoin, and and the transactions went through and they were basically free, and then really convenient and useful. So more people started to use Bitcoin. There were more Bitcoin transactions every day, and the blocks grew from 5 kilobytes to 10 kilobytes, and more people started to use Bitcoin, and then they grew to 50 kilobytes and 100 kilobytes, then half a megabyte, and then 3/4 of a megabyte, and then
okay, wait. Let's pause for a second. First of all, Core didn't exist when the block limit was put in. It didn't have that name. It didn't have that organization. So don't blame Core. So you can't say Core did something to Bitcoin, because all Core ever did was add features.
The block size limit.
So you're saying that they should have done something.
I'm saying that I guess here's what I'm saying. Two things. So I'm saying that the block size limit should have never been put in the first place. It should have been kept in place.
So you disagree with Satoshi?
No, even Satoshi. You're saying that Satoshi didn't want the block size limit to be increased?
He put the block size limit there.
Because other people advocated that he do that as a temporary, that's the key word there, temporary measure to prevent people from flooding the network.
Okay, let's move on a little bit. Talked about temporary.
No. We should finish each subject one at a time until we have it done and clear. And if we run out of time today, I'd be happy to spend another hour or two tomorrow or later this week.
I just wanted to make sure
we're going to run out of time today.
So what do you think I'm missing? What did you want me to comment on that?
So clear in Satoshi's own words, he said that the ultimate solution is to allow the blocks to get as big as they need to be in order to accommodate the people using Bitcoin. And that's the way that Bitcoin grew for the first 7 or 8 years of Bitcoin's existence. And it worked to grow Bitcoin from nothing into a worldwide phenomenon.
And the block size never changed in those 7 or 8 years. You're saying that they allowed it to grow. It stayed the same.
No, the limit stayed the same.
It never changed.
The actual size did change. It changed from 5 kilobytes to 10 kilobytes to 50 kilobytes.
Oh, you mean the amount of people, the amount of space being utilized changed?
Right. So effectively, for the first 7 or 8 years of Bitcoin, there was effectively no block size limit because the blocks never, ever actually were.
That's awfully conveniently semantic for you to say that the limit was always there, and sometimes anybody could expand it.
Was infinite.
Don't you remember Satoshi Dice and how he was using the blockchain? He was quote unquote spamming.
Satoshi Dice was one of the best things to ever happen to Bitcoin. It was one of the most successful businesses ever for Bitcoin. Look at how many people.
I didn't ask you how successful it is. We're talking about how before, when they had cheap transactions, they were able to do every dice roll on the chain, and eventually it became too expensive for them, right?
You don't think that was a good thing?
I don't think it was a feasible thing because
I have a question for you. Do you want people using Bitcoin in commerce? What is your goal with Bitcoin? Why are you involved with Bitcoin? What are you trying to accomplish? Please tell me.
First of all, I'm not trying to get anybody to do anything with Bitcoin. I know what I like about Bitcoin, and I want to protect what Bitcoin is. I don't want to
tell me what you like and what you want to protect it.
I like that it is decentralized, permissionless, and that I have nobody that can take it from me. It's mine. It's financial freedom. I like it as a store of value. I like it as a way to have more private money, and I like it that it's not inflationary. So I like.
So, don't a bunch of altcoins also meet those characteristics?
Oh yeah, sure they do. I don't have a problem with altcoins.
So I'll tell you what I'm trying to achieve with Bitcoin. So what I'm trying to achieve with Bitcoin is create a form of money that everybody on the entire planet can use without needing permission from governments or banks or corporations or anybody at all. And eventually I want to see Bitcoin replace the dollar and the euro and the yen and make it so it's impossible for governments to control money, because free trade benefits everybody. And the best way to have more free trade around the world is to have a money that's free for people to use without needing permission.
Okay, so you want it to be permissionless. You want it to be you want it to be decentralized so a government can't control it. Would you agree with that?
I think a lot of people get confused and they think that decentralization is a goal in and of itself. I don't think that decentralization is a goal in and of itself. I think decentralization is simply a tool that we use to achieve censorship resistance. And as long as we have enough decentralization to have that censorship resistance, that's enough. We don't need Bitcoin to be—
How do we know how much is enough?
I've never ever heard of anybody having their on-chain transactions censored other than on Bitcoin Core, because the fees are too high and your transaction might get dropped from the mempool. I don't know of anybody who's ever had their transaction censored.
Well, that depends on how you define a censored transaction. Because I know that like there have been block rollbacks where there are some miners that have lost block rewards because miners with more hash power were able to rewind the chain a couple blocks. So there has been censorship. I don't know if you would qualify that. And then when people apply external taint to the chain, say like at Coinbase using coin analytics and things like this, they have plenty ability to censor what you're doing, right?
Well, that's the other problem with these full blocks, which cause the high fees and unreliable on-chain transactions, is it forces people or incentivizes people to use centralized Bitcoin banks like Coinbase and Xapo and take your pick of those sorts of centralized services, which then they have complete with your money. They have complete control of your money. You're completely at their mercy. So that's a rising force in Bitcoin. Whereas on Bitcoin Cash or other currencies where are cheap, fast, and reliable, you have no incentive to use these centralized institutions.
You mean no incentive to use centralized institutions like Korean BitThumb, where people lost tons of money because during the top of the Bitcoin Cash pump, and they lost access because it was the only exchange that everybody was using?
If you're using an exchange, you're at the risk of their exchange. But look at Bitcoin.
But you see the parallel I'm making, right? You're saying it doesn't happen in Bitcoin Cash, but it just happened in Bitcoin Cash, the same way you were worried about.
Which one do you think it's more likely to happen? On one where people are using Coinbase transactions, I believe the fee is free. If you try and do an on-chain transaction, you're looking at $5, $10, $20 to do that.
But the thing is I have a Bitcoin business. We support SegWit deposits. You can withdraw, and the people that do it pay cheap fees. So we pay cheap fees when people will play with us. So there is a solution.
How many coins do you accept for your? And I don't know how to pronounce your Zotica or however you pronounce it. Sorry.
Exotica.
Spelling. How many different? Do you guys only accept Bitcoin Core, or what?
We only accept Bitcoin and nothing else.
What do you think about the fact that all sorts of businesses that used to only accept Bitcoin and nothing else became full, which caused high fees and unreliable Bitcoin transactions? All these businesses like Coinbase and like blockchain.info and like a whole bunch of others that Bitcoin have now been busy.
I know exactly what I think. Why the hell don't they have SegWit working yet?
Because it was easier for them to integrate altcoins, apparently.
We are literally a 3-person company. And we had SegWit working. We had to add our own code even to make it work. And we had SegWit working within the first week that it was released. And so I don't see any reason why. And these people had months and months, maybe even a year or more to prepare to be able to implement SegWit as a layer 2 scaling, which actually works a lot better as a scaling in philosophy. We're talking about exponential scaling.
So let's talk about philosophy versus empirical evidence. So with Bitcoin, we have a 7 or 8 year track record of empirical evidence of what worked and worked incredibly well to grow Bitcoin, and that was on-chain scaling, with the blocks going from 5 kilobytes to 50 kilobytes.
No. There was not on-chain scaling happening in that time period. Bitcoin didn't.
You're denying reality.
Bitcoin did not change, so you can't.
What size were the blocks in 2000? Hold on. What size were the blocks in 2011?
I don't know. 1, right?
5, 10. No, maybe 5 kilobytes, 10 kilobytes, somewhere in there.
So you're talking. Yeah, I don't know what block space was being used.
Are the blocks today about a megabyte?
But I also don't think it matters, because there has to be a limit. Would you agree?
No, I don't think that there has to be a limit.
Why?
You're the one claiming that there has to be a limit.
Sure.
The burden of
I'll
proof
tell
is
you
on
why
you.
there has to be a limit.
Why does there need to be a limit?
Because there's infinite demand for block space. Would you agree?
No.
Why?
It depends on the price that the miners set for the block space.
But if you have infinite space, everybody and their mother would do things like Satoshi Dice and fill the entire blockchain, and it would just become immensely, infinitely huge. It would be unmanageable.
Do you think that the miners are going to mine an infinitely large block?
No, I don't think they're going to mine. There's some size. I don't know what size they will or won't mine, and I don't know what size will or won't propagate.
We don't know what the right. And I don't claim that I know the right amount of block size.
Well, you claim that too. You claim that too is better.
You don't claim that you don't actually know. I don't. I tell you, I'm claiming that you don't know, and I don't know, and I'm saying that nobody knows what the right amount of block space to produce is.
So in a situation where nobody knows, if you're trying to apply science and be responsible about technology, where a lot of people have a lot of value here, if there's all kinds of variables that nobody knows, what do you think is the best approach? Do you think it's a conservative one or a risky one?
I think the conservative one is the one that lets the market decide what the right amount of block space to produce is. And if you want to talk about conservative versus, can you name one single other altcoin that has full blocks? It's never happened before in the entire history of the Bitcoin.
I don't watch them. But this is a claim to fame. This is because everybody wants Bitcoin and everybody wants to use Bitcoin. And so
what's risky? Hold on. Can I finish my point? And then I'll let you. I'll be quiet while you give your rebuttal. So it's never ever happened before in the entire history of cryptocurrencies, right? So now Bitcoin's the first cryptocurrency ever to have full blocks and to create a fee market and high fees and unreliable transactions. That's incredibly risky to have Bitcoin be the first one to experiment on in this way. If you want to experiment with full blocks and high fees, we should be doing it on some little altcoin that nobody cares about rather than the market leader. And
all right, you repeatedly paint things as if something is happening or there is action being taken that is causing harm. But all you're doing is describing things the way they always were. Don't make it sound like that people are doing something to Bitcoin, that we're running some kind of experiment by doing inaction. Doing inaction is not an experiment. It's leaving things the way they are. It's conservative, right? So don't paint it that way.
So I guess my point is that in order to keep things the same, because there was effectively no block size limit first 7 or 8 years of existence. So in order to keep that the same,
there was never effectively no block size limit. Stop saying that.
There was never
in the protocol. It's like you can find it in the code. It's there.
Effectively no block size limit because the blocks were never ever 1 megabyte until just recently.
I don't think you understand what effectively means. It was not effectively that, because if it was effectively infinite, people would have effectively made it infinite. They would have used it.
There wasn't even 1 megabyte worth of block space demand in the market up until very recently. Otherwise, the blocks would have been 1 megabyte a long time ago. So the fact that the blocks were always 5 or 10 or 50 kilobytes means that there wasn't infinite demand for block space, even back when the block space was free. Most of the transactions for free. And just very recently, the blocks became full, and Bitcoin's the first currency to ever have that happen to. That's incredibly reckless. And in any other business, if a team of developers are hired to solve a problem, and then it failed this incredibly miserably and caused the entire network to be backed up and congested and less reliable than ever before, they would be fired. And that's exactly what's happening in the Bitcoin ecosystem as a whole. Businesses like Bitcoin.com, Blockchain.info, Coinbase, take your pick, are all busy integrating Bitcoin Cash because it works, and it works the same way that Bitcoin did for the first 7 or 8 years of Bitcoin's history. And if people want to keep using Bitcoin Core, that's just fine. More power to them. Feel free to pay your $20 and wait 2 days for your transaction to get confirmed. If you want fast, cheap, reliable transactions that work exactly how Bitcoin used to work for its first 7 or 8 years of history, that's Bitcoin Cash, and that's why we're seeing a mass migration.
I think you need to be careful calling Bitcoin Cash reliable. You have your difficulty swings where you're processing, 50 blocks in one day, inflating it way past the rate of Bitcoin, of the original Bitcoin.
Less than 1% difference.
So what? You're okay with inflation?
I prefer to have less inflation rather than more, but the amount of inflation.
Prefer to have less. Why doesn't Bitcoin Cash have less inflation than Bitcoin?
Bitcoin Cash currently has the same inflation schedule as Bitcoin Core.
Then why are there so many more Bitcoin Cash tokens than Bitcoin tokens?
for a short period of time, Bitcoin Cash managed to suck away a whole bunch of the hash rate from Bitcoin Core, which should be terrifying for Bitcoin Core supporters. What happens if Bitcoin Cash continuously is more profitable to mine the Bitcoin Core, and more miners switch away from Bitcoin Core to Bitcoin Cash? And instead of the Bitcoin Core blocks that are only 1 megabyte each being every 10 minutes apart, they become every 20 minutes or every 30 minutes. So Bitcoin Core's throughput capacity gets cut in half or cut by a third.
Well, any shift in mining hash power is going to affect either chain, and it affects your chain more than it's affecting Bitcoin currently. So don't paint it as if oh my God, what's wrong with Bitcoin? Because right now Bitcoin Cash is wild, and you're printing more coins. And I want to bring up something else about Bitcoin Cash that I don't think anybody else really brings up, but when you reset the difficulty to be lower, when you, I forget what you're calling your algorithm stuff, EDA and such, when you reset that difficulty to be a lower value, it allows miners to reuse old work that would have been invalid on Bitcoin. So they can spam blocks and they can get block rewards without doing the same amount of work. And when you do it, when you fork again to fix that algorithm and reset the difficulty again, you repeatedly give them the opportunity to reuse old work like that. So your chain allows ASIC boost, it allows malleability, and it allows reusing of work. So how are these are some pretty big disadvantages? Oh, and it has higher inflation. So tell me how that's better.
There's just under 17 million Bitcoin Core coins and just under 17 million Bitcoin Cash coins. The two chains is about 120,000, which is way less than 1%. I'd have to get out the calculator, but way less than 1%, right? So the U.S. dollar inflation is way more than 1% per year. So to harp on the amount
is that your benchmark? Is the dollar? I hope not.
But almost all that inflation came in two specific periods in which Bitcoin Cash had way more hash rate for a very short period of time. I think the current
but this is expected behavior. Like if there's a coin that people can mine on the same hash
at this point,
like no longer. If there's two SHA-256 coins and somebody's overpaying for one of them, everybody should expect the miners to go there, because miners are mining for profit. They aren't mining idealistically. If they have an opportunity to make more money, they're going to make it. So when you go and you convert whatever amount of Bitcoins you converted to Bitcoin Cash and you pump the price, that's demand, and they see it, and they're going to come back and they're going to come and give you your demand. They're going to say, okay, I'll mine your coin if you want to overpay for it. But eventually,
what's the problem with that?
There is no problem with that at all. Okay. Buy whatever coin you want and fund whatever miner you want. There's no problem with that at all.
We agree. Okay.
So I don't know. Let's move on to the next point.
Well, I guess I can elaborate on that point that we do agree on, is that more and more businesses are going to start to use Bitcoin Cash. More and more Bitcoin Cash happening around the world. More and more people will be using it in commerce. And as that happens, more and more people will start to use Bitcoin Cash as a store of value. And once Bitcoin Cash consistently is more profitable to mine than Bitcoin Core, more and more of that hash rate will switch over to Bitcoin Cash, and Bitcoin Core can adjust fast enough on Bitcoin Core that its throughput capacity will be even more limited than it is today, which will make it even less usable than it is today, which will drive even more people to use Bitcoin Cash. And I see that I would guess that there's a more likely than not chance that Bitcoin Cash will eventually suck away all of Bitcoin Core's hash rate and all of Bitcoin Core's commerce that's happening in the world. I think that's more likely than not.
It's like Bitcoin Cash is doing something new. The only difference between Bitcoin Cash and every altcoin that's tried to do what you're doing is that it used a proof of stake sort of holders for the tokens, copied it, and made a fork. It's still no different than any other altcoin. All of these altcoins can say the same thing you're saying. You're saying,
and
everybody's going to use us because we're faster. Look, how is Bcash better than Litecoin? Let's say that.
How is Bitcoin Cash better than Litecoin? Is that Bitcoin Cash has a much larger user base. It has more merchant adoption. It has more businesses using it. It has
show me this. Where is this user base? How are you measuring this?
Okay, so for anybody out there, go over to coinmarketcap.com. Our trade volume for Bitcoin Cash was just under $2 billion with a B, $2 billion.
Are there any zero fee exchanges included in that total?
I'd have to check. I would guess that there probably are. But
then it's absolutely unusable, right? Would you agree that if there are zero fee, it's unusable?
I don't say it's unusable. So here's why. So using roundish numbers.
You don't remember when China was doing zero fee and the volumes were like through the roof, and as soon as the government made the change, the volumes went down to nothing. You don't remember that?
I'm checking right now. So give me 1 second on the markets for Litecoin. So BitThumb is one of those with 0 fees. I'm guessing I'm not a super expert when it comes to BitThumb.
I'm pretty sure that it has 0 fee.
Okay, so BitThumb also has Litecoin trading. BitThumb has Litecoin and Bitcoin Cash trading. Yet Bitcoin Cash is having about $2 billion a day in volume on the exchanges, whereas Litecoin is having about $400 million a day.
So we'll agree
Cash has more
than
five times as much economic transactions happening on exchanges than Litecoin. So there's a
no, because we're trying to start with a premise here that we can't use a volume transaction number that has 0 fee wash trading available, right?
Disagree with that premise because both Litecoin and Bitcoin Cash.
Roger, you disagree with every premise that allows you to be able to use Sybil attacks and spam. Like that's what you do. You use your marketing. You get a bunch of socks to re-like and retweet everything that you're doing. You upvote and downvote whatever you like.
I'd like to address that too. So that's an absolute lie, and I take offense to people claiming that I'm using sock puppets to do whatever. I've never ever paid any sort of social media company to do any sort of astroturfing at all ever.
You have You have the Birds thing that literally does that.
Yeah, Birds is a public platform where anybody can post anything and promote anything that they want on there. So Peter Todd had a bunch of tweets that were being promoted on there, right? Is he an astroturfer? No. Anybody can post their tweets up there and have it retweeted and that was one of the most powerful marketing tools there. And a bunch of core trolls had it complained to Twitter and had it taken offline.
You created a platform to obfuscate whether anybody could see that you were doing this or not. You could use your own platform to fund it. You are the spokesperson. You are a cheerleader of Bcash, so people point at you as somebody that would be the source.
Continue insulting me. I'm not interested in continuing on this. It's Bitcoin Cash. Get it straight, and if you do that again, I'm going to end the interview because I'm not interested in being insulted. Okay, I'm promoting Bitcoin Cash.
It's not an insult. Why do you have to take it personally? It's just a name. I actually like it better.
Insulted here? I'm being insulted. I don't need to be insulted by you. I have enough money. I was a self-made multimillionaire before I ever got involved in Bitcoin. I don't need to have my buttons pushed by people like you on the internet. It's Bitcoin Cash.
Roger, the only reason you want to call it Bitcoin Cash is because you want to co-opt the brand.
I think Bitcoin Cash has a more legitimate claim to being the Bitcoin that was outlined in the Bitcoin.org website at this point. So yes, that's my position.
So you personally just want people to think that it's Bitcoin.
It's Bitcoin. Read my lips.
It's Bitcoin Cash. Bitcoin. We all know what the real Bitcoin is. Because we can have a conversation.
Bitcoin.
If we didn't know what Bitcoin was. You can't just go redefining and undefining all things. There's no, even if Bitcoin Cash becomes more valuable in market cap and more volume provably than Bitcoin, it's still not Bitcoin. It's Bitcoin Cash.
I agree on that point. It's the longest chain with the most proof of work, and if Bitcoin Cash manages to do that, it very clearly, indisputably Bitcoin.
The longest chain. The reason why that was ever explained was for determining which chain was the correct chain within the same protocol. When you change the protocol and you make an incompatible protocol, the whole longest chain thing is not what he was talking about when he was talking about that. He's just talking about how it resolves problems within the current network. But you made a new network. There's no longest anything.
I disagree. Let's get some fun stats.
Didn't Namecoin pass both of them because of merge mining or something? Is Namecoin the real Bitcoin?
I don't know. I don't have an opinion on there. Yeah. So let's talk about some interesting stats for the market, right? So over the last week, Bitcoin Core is up 16%. Bitcoin Cash is up 37%. Up 66%. Up 368%. And over the last 3 months, it was up 137%. Up 229%. So it won't take too much more time like this with Bitcoin Cash consistently outperforming Bitcoin Core until Bitcoin Cash has a bigger market cap than Bitcoin Core. And I think that that's going to happen on pretty short order because world's #1 Bitcoin wallet in the entire world for Bitcoin Cash is coming by the end of this year. Coinbase has announced that full support for Bitcoin Cash is coming. Already added full support for Bitcoin Cash to their wallet and their block explorer. The only piece of that puzzle left is their merchant services platform. And when you have two versions of Bitcoin, one that has Bitcoin Cash that's fast, cheap, and reliable, and you have Bitcoin Core that's slow, expensive, and unreliable.
Don't call it unreliable because if you pay the fee, you'll get in. That's the same standard. If you pay the fee, you get in. The question is that people are willing to pay a higher fee on Bitcoin because it is more valuable and more secure.
So I've been paying a higher fee on Bitcoin Core because that's what it takes to get my transaction to an exchange so I can sell it for more Bitcoin Cash. So
do you still have Bitcoins?
Some Bitcoins, yeah.
Why?
Because it's stupid to put all your eggs in one basket. And I hear Adam back, and it sounds like you're getting at the same thing. Like, why don't you sell 100% of your Bitcoins? That would be stupid. Why would you?
I'm not getting at anything. I'm just interested to know, because for somebody that's so emphatic, you know, I would expect that. I would expect that.
Maybe I'm wrong.
Right? I mean, you said Bitcoin is broken. You hate everything that they've done to it. Quote, you know, you think that people are attacking it or throttling it, whatever you think, but you still hold it. It makes no sense.
I think Bitcoin's usability has been incredibly damaged and intentionally damaged by replaced by
still useful to you.
Full block possibly. Hold on, but what Bitcoin Core still does have is this huge network effect of all these wallets and merchant processors and name recognition around the world. It has a huge network effect, and that network effect is very important and very useful as well. Cash has to overcome that network effect, but I think it will. But
how is the network effect useful to you? Like, I still don't understand why you hold Bitcoins if you hate it so much. It makes
I'll tell you why. So I started selling some Bitcoins when they're, I don't know, $6,000 something each recently for more Bitcoin Cash and things like that. Now Bitcoin Core is $9,000 and something each. So I have, you know, an extra 30% or so because I didn't sell all of them.
And you could have just left them all in Bitcoin and just kept going up. And
well,
with the amount of Bitcoin that people think you have, with the amount of Bitcoin people think you have, and the amount that you may have spent on Bcash, you're going to have more.
I would like an apology at this point. It's not Bcash; it's Bitcoin Cash.
Look, it's what I call it. I'm not doing it on purpose. It's just so easy. It's a nice name. Okay. It really is.
This interview is over. I don't need to be insulted. I was a self-made millionaire before I even got involved in Bitcoin. Now I have even more money.
Who cares if you're a millionaire? It has nothing to do with anything.
I don't need to be insulted by some person on the internet. What's your gross annual revenue for Exotica?
None of your business.
Isn't it? Less than $1 million, huh?
It has nothing to do with this conversation.
Gross annual revenue is less than $1 million. So that means you don't know how to run a successful business. Of course, we do more than $1 million in sales.
Bitcoin is not a business, Roger. We're not running a business here. Bitcoin is changing money. It's decentralized.
The world for the better. You're playing around with your little porno site.
What's wrong with the porno site? You have a problem with sex now?
Difference. I'm trying to change the entire world for the better by giving every single human being on the planet the ability to have complete control of their own finances. And you're here insulting what I'm trying to do, calling names and calling my projects names, and then you don't have any real world.
I called it literally a name, not an insult. And now you're the one trying to insult me for the type of work that I do. Yeah, I see nothing wrong with sex. I see nothing wrong with people entertaining themselves.
But people selling whatever porn they want on the internet, I have no problem with that whatsoever. I'm a libertarian and a voluntarist. I think it's great for the girls. It's great for the guys. Everybody's happy. Or if it's guys and guys or guys and girls, whatever you want to get involved there, I have no problem with that whatsoever. So I'm not a prude when it comes to that, but I don't think it's okay to insult people, right? If I started calling your website, correct pronunciation is Exotica, if I started calling it Stupotica, you would take offense to that.
But you're adding the word stupid in there. Where did I add an insult when I say Bcash? I'm just abbreviating to make it easy to say. It's not like personal. There's no personal aspect to it.
The quarter of Bitcoin Cash doesn't like it being called Bcash. So I'm asking you nicely, and I asked you politely.
Isn't that kind of indicative? That's kind of indicative of how centralized it could be. If there are only a few people that even care. It's like you and Jahan, and then everybody else doesn't give a shit.
There's only two types of people that call it Bcash. They're people that have been brainwashed by this social media attack to call it Bcash. And I implore anybody who watches this to go out and Google why Bitcoin Cash is called Bcash. And Yonald Football, or however you pronounce his difficult name, wrote a fantastic essay explaining exactly what's going on there. It's a social media attack to try and confuse people about what Bitcoin Cash is. And so there's only two people that call it Bcash. It's people that are trying to engage in that social manipulation, or it's people that have been manipulated and brainwashed by that social manipulation. And I don't think you're one of the people that's been socially brainwashed. I think you're one of the ones trying to do that brainwashing. And so I don't appreciate it. I'm not going to stand for it. Life is busy. Life is short. Okay. I don't need to be standing here.
I'm going to mirror rebuttal the same comment. I think that there are only three people that want to call Bitcoin Cash. You and Jahan and your sock puppets, okay? Because there's nobody else.
I've never hired a single sock puppet. I don't need to be insulted. But please post this so the entire world can see how incredibly rude you are to me.
Hey, I'm sorry, man. All right, guys, it's over. For those of you that bet that Roger would rage quit, congratulations. Thanks for watching. Adios.
So I'd like to take a few minutes to apologize to everybody about the recent heated discussion I just had. That was a good example of how not to keep your cool. That guy did a really, really good job of pushing my buttons. He repeatedly called Bitcoin Cash Bcash, despite the fact that I asked him numerous times to call it by its correct name, not the insulting term of Bcash, but asked him to call it by Bitcoin Cash. But the thing that really pushed my button was when he accused me of having hired paid shills on the internet to shill for Bitcoin Cash or Bitcoin Unlimited or on-chain scaling as outlined in Bitcoin. I have never, ever done anything of the sort, and I'm incredibly tired of people saying that. And I'm tired of hearing the lies that say that. When he did that, it just really pushed my buttons. He referred to birds.bitcoin.com, which is a fantastic service that allows anybody, not just me, but anybody in the entire internet to pay to have tweets promoted on Twitter. But the real goal of that website was to get Bitcoin into the hands of more people. It makes it so anybody can earn Bitcoin simply by tweeting a message about Bitcoin. That's a fantastic tool to get Bitcoin into the hands of more people. But anyhow, we're all human. I got way more heated up than I should have in that debate, and I apologize for that. But if someone asks you nicely and politely not to call them by a certain name or call one of their products or one of the things they're involved in by a certain name, you should be respectful of that and not do that. And even more than that, you shouldn't tell lies about other people, which is exactly what he was doing when he said that I've been paying for shills on the internet. I've never done anything of the sort. And if I was a more litigious person, I would probably hire a lawyer to sue him for libel or slander for that sort of thing, because I've never, ever done anything like that. Although somebody, we don't know exactly who, has been caught red-handed doing that exact same sort of social manipulation in favor of Bitcoin Core. So we don't know if it's Bitcoin Core actual advocates or if it's Bitcoin on-chain scaling advocates doing it as a false flag attack, but somebody absolutely without any doubt has been doing that in favor of Bitcoin Core arguments. I have never, ever done anything like that in favor of Bitcoin Cash or Bitcoin Unlimited or any of those things, and I'm not aware of anybody having done that either. So just wanted to clear that up and apologize to people for letting him really get my goat. I shouldn't get that excited about it, but it's just that passionate for me about Bitcoin. This is an opportunity we have to improve the lives of every single person on the planet. And these knuckleheads are there saying, oh, it just needs to be our little science project. And it doesn't matter if people in other countries get to use it or not. It doesn't matter if people, poor people can afford to use it or not. Well, that's not the Bitcoin that I got involved in. I want Bitcoin to be useful for every single person on the planet, rich or poor, black or white, first world or third world. It's for everybody, all over the planet. And that's why I'm involved in Bitcoin, and that's why I'm so passionate about it. And the passion came through a little bit too much earlier in this video, but just want to apologize for people. But to learn more, please visit bitcoin.com. This is about changing the world for the better for every single human being, wherever they may be. So thank you all for watching.